Hi everybody, my name's Jacob and I'm going to be talking about video games. But more specifically, I'm going to be talking about an ethical perspective on loot boxes in video games. Now, video games are a large part of our society. Whether you play them all the time, or it's a small hobby, or you don't play them at all, you can't deny how big they are. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry with billions of players across the world. Video games, because of the size, has a massive influence throughout our society. And because of the size and how much money it brings in and the influence it has, especially the influence for children, teenagers, it brings it under constant scrutiny. Everything is under a microscope. You can see not only within the media in the video game industry, but the media as a whole, things such as storylines, design choices, even how the games work are always being analyzed. They're being talked about. And there's a specific mechanic in recent years that's brought about a lot of controversy, and those are loot boxes. So what loot boxes are, it's a virtual box, it's a virtual container, and they contain different items for the game that they're in, and depending on the game, depends on the items, they're used in several different ways. A lot of times they're cosmetics for the character you play as, could be weapons, power-ups, it just depends on how the loot boxes are used for the game. But they've come under a lot of fire, especially in recent years, for a couple different reasons. I'm going to talk about two main reasons. One comes from the players themselves. A lot of players don't like loot boxes because not only are they a form of a microtransaction, which is just a small purchase in the game that you've already bought, a lot of people say they create unfair conditions in games, specifically in online games. And then on the other side of that, continuing in that vein actually, they've actually been talked about as a form of gambling. There's been a lot of talk about that. There's been legislation that's been in the works and investigations about how these loot boxes are actually a form of gambling. So loot boxes themselves, they have a longer history than you may expect. If you think back, many of us will maybe remember trading card games. When Pokemon first came out, Magic the Gathering, all of those, you'd buy the cards in packs and get your cards, build decks, and it was a big thing. It's still a massive thing. But that's really where the idea of loot boxes started. Because the way loot boxes work, it's a virtual container of items, but you don't know what those items are. There's a certain chance to what you're going to get. Certain things have different odds for what you're going to get. And that's how those trading card games work. I remember when I was a kid in 3rd grade, I loved Pokemon. It first came out, I was obsessed with it, and I would beg my parents to take me to the store. We'd go there, and I would just beg them to get me a pack of Pokemon cards. And there'd be a pack of cards, it was about 7 cards, and you're always guaranteed a rare card, but you weren't ever guaranteed a specific card. You wouldn't know what was in the pack. It was up to chance. And so back then, actually, trading card games came under fire for a little bit, legally, because there are some people, didn't like the idea, and they were thought of as a lottery for kids. Because, all these people were spending money on these packs, not knowing what they were getting, hoping to get a rare card, and so a lot of people saw it as a lottery. But there were some lawsuits here or there, but they all kind of fizzled out and didn't go anywhere. But that kind of same idea has now come about today with loot boxes, and it's an even bigger problem. So when loot boxes were really first getting attention, there's a publisher named EA. There's EA Sports, just EA in general. They publish a lot of different games. It's a massive company. So EA started introducing loot boxes into their sports titles. They first did it in one of their soccer games. After that, they did it in one of the Madden football games. They did it in one of their, I think it was a UFC game. And the way they were doing it, they would introduce loot boxes, and that's how you would build your teams. For instance, for the soccer game, you would earn the loot boxes in gameplay, and then the loot boxes, you didn't know what you were going to get, but they would contain different players, coaches, stadiums, and that's how you would build your teams and play online. And they started doing that for all their sports titles, and they're still doing it for all their sports titles today. they have all these loot boxes that get you these players. Some players are better than other players. Some coaches are better than other coaches. And this led to a lot of backlash by players. Players didn't like this because it creates what's called a pay-to-win system. And what that is the people with more money have better stuff, basically. Because the loot boxes, you're not sure what you're going to get. Sometimes it could be good, sometimes it could be not so good, something you don't need. But these players who don't have a lot of money, or they spent their money on the game and that's all they can spend on the game, they can't buy loot boxes. A lot of games allow you to earn loot boxes, but usually it's slower paced, so the game almost kind of pushes you to buy loot boxes. The option's always there, really big, buy loot boxes, get what you want. So players who do have a lot of money, or access to a lot of money through their parents, they can buy a lot more loot boxes, they get the better players, the better items, and it creates a pay-to-win system. Players are paying to be better than other players, and this causes a lot of backlash, and even an ethical backlash. Is this right to do? Especially in online games. Online games is really where all of this is coming to a head. And for some people may think this may not be a big deal, may not be an ethical issue, but if you really think about it, how big video games are, and specifically online gaming. Online gaming itself, there's a few statistics I pulled. I think it was in 2017, statistics show there are 55 million online console players that year. That's only for consoles, Xbox, PS4, the Wii U. There are roughly around 55 million players in America, North America, to be exact. And then there are also what's called Steam, which is a platform for PC users. It's the biggest platform. They are recording 33 million daily active users. As in every day, there are 33 million people online on Steam playing games. It's a huge, huge industry. Millions of people are playing it. And especially when it comes to online play, there's competitive. There's what's called esports. These are actually people who are paid to play video games as a sport. And of course, if you think about it in regards to physical sports, there's always supposed to be a level playing field. For football, soccer, baseball, the rules are there meant to be fair. It's supposed to be an even playing field, and the people who are naturally better or who work harder are the ones who win, not the people who pay to win. But that's what's happening in a lot of online gaming now, and that's a lot of what people are saying was happening. That's what they're upset about. So because these people are already spending money on the game, they're expected to be an even playing field for online competitive gaming, but these pay-to-win systems are causing this not to be able to happen. Because they're going even though they are better than other players, the ones who have more money have the better characters, have the better items, are able to do better in the game in the long run. So this is really seen as an ethical issue, and it's talked about consistently because new games are still using these types of loot box systems. There was also another game recently, though, called Halo 5 that had some controversy with its loot boxes, but this one was a little less clear than the EA examples because of the implementation. The implementation of the loot boxes, or how they're used in the game, this matters a lot, and I think it really determines the ethical standing of its use. Because in Halo 5, they were loot boxes only for a specific game mode online, not the main competitive mode. And the way they were used, you couldn't just buy loot boxes and immediately use the items you get. They were divvied out naturally as the game progressed during the round. So it kind of helped to even things out a little bit, so even if you had more money and you bought more loot boxes, you wouldn't be able to use everything at once. You were using them at the same pace of other players who had earned fewer loot boxes. So this had some controversy, but it wasn't as near as big as the EA controversy in their sports titles. And I think this is an example where it really wasn't as big of an ethical issue. But the real big one today, especially in the media, has been the gambling. There was one game that really brought this to a head. It was Battlefront 2. another EA title. You kind of see the trend here. So in the game Battlefield 2, they had loot boxes, but this was a mostly online game, online competitive game. But the way they worked the game, all of the pieces of your character, your weapons, your abilities, everything you had to get through loot boxes. And you could gain loot boxes through normal gameplay, but a lot of people were saying the progression was extremely slow, and the game was obviously pushing you to buy loot boxes. And it became such a big issue, such massive controversy online, that the media started to pick it up. And the media started reporting on it, EA stocks were taking hits, and then legislators actually got on board, and they were taking a look at loot boxes. Because of Battlefield 2, because of other games, and all of this controversy was bringing up, legislators started looking into it, and investigations began into whether loot boxes were actually gambling. There were several investigations in Europe through several legislators. There was one over in Europe that actually called for a ban on all video games that had loot boxes, because they said it was a form of gambling that children had access to. There's also the representative of Hawaii, United States, come out and said he was designing laws to prohibit the sale of any games that had loot boxes to minors, because they were all viewing it as gambling, and that would make it illegal. And this would be a huge, huge thing for the video game industry, and it also really brings about this ethical look at it, or is this right? Because if kids have access to illegal gambling, obviously that's unethical. So a lot of these investigations are still going on. Several of the big ones deemed that loot boxes are not a form of gambling. The reason they deemed that was because with gambling, you're not guaranteed to get anything. You put in your money, you may get something, you may not. Whereas with loot boxes, the way they're used, you are getting something. You're going to get something, you just don't know what it is. So because of that difference between the loot boxes and normal gambling, many investigations deemed it to be not gambling, and they're not under legal repercussions. But like I said, there are several investigations. There's still several legislators still pushing to either regulate or outright ban loot boxes. This is still a huge issue, a huge ethical issue for video game industry and the developers and publishers and the players today. So even after all this controversy, the back and forth, loot boxes are still everywhere. Even games are coming out recently are still using loot boxes or forms of loot boxes. And again, it kind of comes back to those two examples, the EA example, the Halo 5 example. I think it really comes down to the implementation of the loot boxes. How are they being used? Are they creating an unfair system? Are they giving certain people advantages over other people? Or are they just an option that's there for you if you want to spend the money, but you don't have to, and it doesn't really affect you? I think these differences, the differences in the implementation, really determine the ethical standing of how these loot boxes are being used. Are they ethical or not? Are they taking advantage of players, or are they just an option for people? And of course the arguments continue back and forth, whether they're good, they're bad, they're ethical, they're unethical, and those arguments are going to continue. But I really think it comes down to an individual basis. They need to be looked at on an individual basis, looked at the implementation, how they're being used, determine whether it's an ethical mechanic. And really, I think it should come down to the players. These are the consumers, the people that are buying the video games, spending the money, spending the time. So really, I think developers and publishers should really start listening to the players on whether or not these systems are deemed ethical or not, and they should be used. But no matter what, the controversy is going to continue, and loot boxes still seem like they're going to be around for a while. And so no matter what, they're going to be there, and they're going to continue to shape the future of the industry. Thank you.